Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm back to break down this 7-game slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. Before we get into it, if you could please go ahead and check out all of the links in the description, all the KJK DFS links. I have a bunch of stuff going on over there, including my MLB DFS packages, as well as some other MLB packages like my betting package. And then I also have stuff like my social, my merch store, and all that type of fun stuff. So go ahead and check that out. If you could please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any future videos that I make. That'd be greatly appreciated. You can follow me over on Twitter at KJK_DFS. And with that being said, let's go ahead and start breaking down this slate today. So if you tune into my other videos, you know, as always, I like to go ahead and sort my sheet by K rate to figure out some pitchers that we're going to want to put in our lineups today. It's fantasy sports. We get points for strikeouts. And when looking at the top pitchers on the slate today, you can see the top guy comes in at a 33.3% K rate, Dinelson Lamet, taking on the Los Angeles Dodgers. Not exactly the most ideal matchup. The Dodgers are stacked the lineup up and down, but Dinelson Lamet does top the slate in strikeout rate. He has a 14% swing strike rate. The ground ball, the fly ball, the hard hit rate stuff isn't the greatest though. And when specifically looking against right-handed hitters, he gives up a lot of ground ball and fly balls. Or I'm sorry, the ground ball rate's bad and he gives a lot of fly balls up. And then against lefties, it does improve a little bit. So he's a guy that's just a high strikeout pitcher, but he does, once again, struggle a little bit in the hard contact. So he's not alone in that build-up in today's league. And when looking at the Vegas lines, they're not currently out, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But he comes in at a 9-1 price tag on DraftKings. And he's definitely a target that we could go ahead and play in our lineups. However, it's not the safest because he's taking on this Los Angeles Dodgers team that's absolutely stacked up and down in their order. So I think he could be a contrarian play. You can get him low. No one likes targeting these Dodgers, and he does have a high strikeout rate. However, it is a little risky because these Dodgers can definitely slug. So Lamet, first guy on the slate to mention. However, the second guy on the slate in K rate is definitely my top option today due to his matchup. Trevor Bower comes in with a 29.9% K rate. He has a 12.7 swinging strike rate. His hard contact, his ground ball, his fly ball stuff is where it gets a little bad, but we can live with it with the strikeout rate. He has a 31.9% strikeout rate against righties. And then against lefties, it drops down to a 27.7, but still very, very good. So it's Trevor Bower. He's a well-known name around the league. He's coming to the Cincinnati Reds team, become the ace, face of the team, and he does come in at a 10-8 price tag on DraftKings. So you're going to pay for him, but for good reason, because these Pittsburgh Pirates have been very, very bad. Lots of strikeouts in their lineup. Not a lot of really anything good going on for them. When analyzing my team hitting data sheet, they're a team that definitely pops up to target, and I definitely have a lot of interest in playing a lot of Trevor Bower today. So Trevor Bower, top pitch on the slate. Get him in your lineups. Love him today. Moving further along, the next guy that I'm going to want to play is that in Jesus Luzardo taking on the Seattle Mariners. The Seattle Mariners are not really the most threatening lineup. Luzardo comes in with a 26.1% K rate. Very good in the fly ball category. Very good in the hard contact category. He has a 25.3% K rate against righties, and then against lefties, it bumps up to a 28.3, and he's just absolutely elite against lefties. He's green across the board, just dominant. So if he is facing a left-handed heavy lineup, we're going to love him even more. And when looking at the team that he's taking on today in the Seattle Mariners, you can see they're going to go ahead and stack up their lineup with all righties. Pretty much they have 3 lefties in there, it's looking like. So not the best matchup from that vantage point. However, I don't really care because the Seattle Mariners aren't really the best team, and Luzardo's shown that he's got good stuff. So in the mid-range at 8.3K, I definitely think that he's an option. If you need to drop down from the top range and save a little bit of salary, but you want a guy that's solid all around and has some strikeout upside, Luzardo's your guy. Next on the list of guys we're going to want to target would be Clayton Kershaw. However, he does have to take on the San Diego Padres team, who's arguably been the hottest team in the league this year. He has a 25.7% carry, a 3.58 Sierra, very good at the 2.79 ERA. I think most people that are playing MLB DFS probably know Clayton Kershaw's name. He's got a 49% ground ball rate. Against righties, he's very solid with the 25.9% K rate, and then he's got the ground ball, the fly ball rate looking very good as well. And against lefties, it gets even better. It's the lefty-lefty matchup, so that's classic. But he's got a 25% K rate over there as well. So Kershaw's not exactly the most elite K rate guy, but he's a good pitcher overall. And he's definitely a guy that you can play in your lineups today, taking on these San Diego Padres. However, I would just put a little disclaimer in that, yeah, similar to Lamet in this game, they're both taking on very good lineups. And while that might lower their ownership, it might dampen the appeal on playing these guys. When you can just go ahead and toss in a guy like Trevor Bower up here that we had discussed already, who's in a great matchup. So, Trevor Bauer, definitely my preferred option. If I'm talking about those top three options, I just want to make that clear for you guys because the matchup just definitely excels him over the top against those guys. And then probably two more guys to mention for you guys. We'll mention Jose Berrios, and then I have a salary relief guy just for salary. Jose Berrios has a 24.5% K rate. Very, I don't know how to say this, barely above average, I guess, is Jose Berrios. He has a 24.1% K rate against righties, a 25% K rate against lefties, and just average across the board. Nothing he does is really stands out, but he's a respectable pitcher, and he's taking on the Chicago White Sox team today, who, while they are a very good lineup up and down, and they've been hot, he does have some favorable hitting conditions in Chicago with 10-mile-an-hour winds blowing in. And then he does take on a team that does have a strikeout rate. The Chicago White Sox are a very dangerous lineup, but they also do strike out a ton. And, specifically when facing this lineup, they do have mostly right-handed hitters that mash. So Berrios, a guy that excels against right-handed hitting in the strikeout category. And then the Chicago White Sox, who do slug but have some strikeouts in the lineup, he's definitely a viable option. Just have to let you guys know the risk that comes with it. However, the upside is definitely there, and he comes in at a 9.3K price tag. So I definitely have some interest in playing Jose Berrios today. And then on the cheap end, we don't really have a lot to work with on the cheap end. I guess I could throw two names out there today because I don't know. It's tough. You have Mitch Keller, Kim, Josh Lindblom, and Tuki Toussaint probably would be, the names I'll throw out there. And out of those guys, when looking at their numbers and their salaries, the top play based on his K rate and his salary has to be number one in Mitch Keller. Just because, Lindblom does top him in K rate, but I think the matchup's going to scare me off Lindblom because he's very bad against left-handed hitting, like very, very bad. And when looking at this Cardinals lineup, I think they have enough lefties in there to scare me off them, but I don't know. That's something we'll have to analyze later in the day when this lineup comes out because it's definitely going to depend on how many lefties and righties they roll out there. But the guy that stands out is Mitch Keller. Because Mitch Keller comes in at an even cheaper price tag than Josh Lindblom at 5.1K because Mitch Keller is only 4K. So that's really the reason I'm bringing him up in the first place. He's extremely cheap. He comes in with a 26.4% K rate. The swinging strike rate, the ground ball, and the fly ball stuff is all respectable. He does have a 6.63 ERA, which is the worst on the slate. And when looking at his splits, he's very, very, very bad against right-handed hitting. He gives up a 531 slugging. That's terrible. However, he does have a 29.5% K rate. And then against lefties, it's the same type of deal. He gives up a lot of hard contact. He has a 566 slugging, a 420 WOBA. Not good. And you could definitely target him with bats if you decide to go that route because, Cincinnati does have some guys that slug. But he's only 4K, and even if he gives up some solo shots and he goes out there and pitches, 5 innings, he gets you some Ks, that could pay off for you in tournaments, and he therefore is my salary relief guy. So, while you are having some risk in his numbers, the salary is a thing in daily fantasy sports, and he's only 4K, so I have to mention him. He's my salary relief option today if I'm throwing in some cheap pitching. Get some Mitch Keller in your laps because while it's a little bit scary with the numbers and you could probably go up and stack against them as well when I get to the bats I'll discuss it, but he's just cheap. He's very, very, very cheap, cheap as you can get. So salary relief, gotta love that today. As far as his price tag, And with that being said, let's go ahead and start talking about some bats that we're going to want to target today because we are done talking about pitching. Done talking about pitchers that we like. Let's talk about some pitchers that we can target with bats. And the first guy that stands out is that well, you have Kim worse than the slate and Sierra, but we're only dealing with a 21 innings pitch sample size. He's given up a lot of hard contact so far, but it's all been against lefties. His numbers against righties have been very impressive. It's the lefties that have gotten him. So I do think that you can go ahead and promote these lefties today because while we're dealing with a small sample size, it's like blatantly obvious. So I think we can jump on spots like this early and try to get an advantage before people realize that this is the case. So I say that, and then you look at the Milwaukee Brewers lineup, and they are stacked up with righties. So they are stacked up with righties that can crush lefties, though. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm gonna wait for these Vegas lines to come out and see what Vegas is telling us and what they think, because this is definitely an interesting spot when looking at the numbers. But when looking at his splits, go ahead and play some Christian Yelich today at a high salary. I think he's a contrarian play that no one's going to play because it's lefty-lefty, and we had talked about Kim's numbers and him really struggling against lefties. So I'm going to wait on the Vegas lines on this one. However, I do think that Christian Yelich is a great contrarian play that you're going to pay up for, and he's going to be very low-owned, and Kim has really struggled against left-handed pitching, so that could really, or left-handed hitters, I should say. So that could really pay off for you. Christian Yelich today, like him as a contrarian play. And then moving further along, the first guy that we're going to want to target on this slate, and really the first game is this Baltimore-Atlanta game. You can see you got Touki Toussaint and Jorge Lopez back-to-back as far as being bad here. Both are really struggling in the swing strike rate. Touki's a little better, but when you look at their splits, Jorge Lopez is pretty good against right-handed hitting. It's the lefties where he really struggles. So these left-handed bats for the Atlanta Braves, I have a lot of interest in today. And the first guy that stands out is definitely Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman is an elite bat. Definitely have a lot of interest in him today. And then once again, similar to the spot we just talked about, we look at the splits and we're like, oh, let's target all the lefties, but the entire lineup consists of right-handed hitting. So interesting there. However, even though they're righties, they're a lineup that can mash, and Jorge Lopez isn't good. He does have a very good ground ball and fly ball rate against right-handed hitting, but the slugging's still bad at 14 slugging, the hard hit rate, and the WOBA. So while it's not ideal, while we would really prefer to have just a bunch of lefties in this lineup, I do think it's ideal from the aspect of that this game does have a 10.5 implied over-under. And the Atlanta Braves have a 5.86 implied run total. So I think you can kind of, not worry about it and go ahead and play these Braves and feel confident. Play the guys with power: Ronald Acuna, Freddie Freeman, Ozuna, D'Arnaud, Swanson, really up and down this lineup. And then this Atlanta Braves team, if you've been playing a lot of Adam Duvall at the bottom of the lineup recently, and that's paid off because he's had some really big games, and you can throw in like a bottom of the lineup stack in Riley, Duvall, Markakis, and Ozzy Albies. So just a stacked lineup up and down. And then I do think that you can have interest in the Orioles as well, taking on Touki Toussaint. You can see he has a really big walk issue. The ERA, the Sierra is not the best. And then when looking at his splits, he's pretty good against righties outside of the walk category once again. He does have a high strikeout rate, but the lefties get him because he gives a 507 slugging, a 39.1% hard hit rate, and a 391 WOBA. Not good. So I do think that you can play some lefties from this Baltimore Orioles team. And once again, a lot of righties. So it seems to be a trend on this slate. A lot of guys that are struggling against lefties, but they're facing right-handed heavy lineups. So maybe we could play Touki and feel pretty good about it. But DJ Stewart definitely stands out in a big way. Rio Ruiz is a little bit more expensive. DJ Stewart's only 2.4K, and he can crush. So he's definitely a big-time salary relief option today, and I'm sure you'll find him on my cheat sheet because that's really cheap and he's in a great matchup. So any of my Patreon members, look for him to be in the cheat sheet today because that's cheap. We're in a good place. I think I explained that, but looking forward to playing some DJ Stewart today. And then you got Chris Davis and Chance Sisco at the bottom of the lineup, who both do have a lot of power. They just struggle in the strikeout category. And when looking at Tukey's numbers as far as strikeout rate to lefties, it's only a 20.7% K rate, so we can live with that. We can target those guys. And we can really target anyone in this Orioles lineup, but like I said, we do prefer the lefties. Moving further along, a lot of Vegas lines aren't out yet, so we're really working off strictly numbers here. We don't really have a lot of lines to work off. But with that being said, the next guy that I will mention is Vince Velasquez taking on these Miami Marlins. And I do think that you could have a lot of interest in these Miami Marlins today because when you look at Velasquez's numbers, they're not good across the board. And then you look at the ground ball and the fly ball rate, it's very, very, very bad. He has a 34.5% ground ball rate and a 44% fly ball rate. And then the only thing he really excels at is his strikeout rate against right-handed hitting. But the slugging's still bad, the hard hit's bad, the WOBA's bad. And then against lefties, it gets even worse. He has a 5.12 slugging, a 3.65 WOBA, and the strikeout rate dips down. So Velasquez is a guy that gives up a lot of fly balls, a lot of hard contact, and that's great for our daily fantasy sports lineups because we want guys that are going to get the ball in the gaps for doubles. We want home runs and all that fun stuff. And I think that the Marlins can supply that for you today. And I really don't know how high they're going to be owned because no one likes stacking the Marlins. And they're in Miami, which isn't the best hitting environment, but with numbers like that from Velasquez, I don't care because when you have a guy like Matt Joyce, I just talked about DJ Stewart, but Matt Joyce is only 2K and he can hit right-handed hitting. And then we mentioned that Velasquez splits against lefties, and that just makes me like him even more. So he pops off the page right away from a cheap aspect. And then Corey Dickerson, Starling Marte, Jesus Aguilar at the top of the order are your premier options in this lineup. Get him in there. And then you got Brian Anderson, Garrett Cooper with some power. Miguel Rojas was on a tear to start the season. Jazz Chisholm is the top prospect that they called up, who has been very cheap. It looks like he got a price bump on DraftKings, but he's still affordable. It's only 3.2K. And I do think that you can have a ton of interest in these Miami Marlins. So, yeah, my top stack would be obviously the 1 through 4 range: Dickerson, Marte, Jesus Aguilar, Matt Joyce. But I do think that you could go ahead and toss in these guys at the bottom of the lineup and feel pretty confident as well. I like the Miami Marlins today. It's going to be interesting to see what they have for a Vegas total because I do think they're in a great spot. So they're another stack to have interest in. And then lastly, I had mentioned having this White Sox-Minnesota game actually has a pretty high implied run total, but I don't necessarily have a ton of interest in the bats because I don't think they're going to just light the world up with home runs necessarily, taking on these two pitchers. While I do think there could be some solo shots type of deal, it's not really my top go-to spot in the slate. It's kind of on the back burner, I should say. I don't want to completely fade it, but I would say the next options you're looking at, you could definitely stack up these Cincinnati Reds against Mitch Keller. I had mentioned he's a good option on the cheap end, but he also does really struggle with the hard contact. So guys like Nick Castellanos, Joey Votto, Eugenio Suarez, Mike Moustakas, Tyler Stevenson, the top prospect, and then Freddie Galvis has a ton of pop for a shortstop, second base spot, and Brian Goodwin. They're another spot that I'll be looking at. But I think the last spot that I have to mention is probably going ahead and stacking against Lindblom and stacking against Kim. I had mentioned, we do need Vegas lines out, but these Milwaukee Brewers definitely do slug some left-handed pitching. So while I had said he's worse against left-handed hitting, we can kind of just waive that and have it just because when you have guys like Jed Jerko, Ryan Braun in the center of the order with their type of power against lefties, you could definitely have interest. And then Avisail Garcia at the top of the order, you could have interest as well. And then you have some cheaper guys on the bottom in Arcia, Urias, Tyrone Taylor, and Nottingham if you want to do a cheap stack. So once again, no Vegas lines to work with, but I do think that you could have interest in stacking this team up. And then on the other side, these St. Louis Cardinals, Lindblom has been pretty respectable in the strikeout rate, but otherwise not the greatest. The ground ball and the fly ball stuff hasn't looked the best. Against righties, it hasn't looked the best. The slugging's been good, but the ground ball and the fly ball stuff's still really bad. And then against lefties, it's very, very, very bad everything. He has a 662 slugging. That's like really stands out. That's just terrible. And definitely going to have a lot of interest in the left-handed bats for St. Louis. And the righties, I had mentioned that. Preferably the righties with low K rates, but Colton Wong stands out at second base today. Tommy Edman, Brad Miller, Paul DeJong, Tyler O'Neill, Matt Carpenter, Matt Wieters. So primarily the lefties and Colton Wong, Brad Miller. You're going to want to get those guys in. Tommy Edman, and then you could throw in Paul Goldschmidt, Paul DeJong, because they get the power. And while he is better against right-handed hitting, that being Lindblom, he still does struggle in the hard contact and all that type of stuff. So a lot of interest in these St. Louis Cardinals. And with that being said, I think that is my overall breakdown of today's slate. A quick little overview of what I've gone over so far. I have a lot of interest in these Miami Marlins, stacking them up against Vincent Velasquez. Mitch Keller is definitely a salary relief option at pitching. However, I definitely have interest in stacking up these Reds as well. So play some lineups with stacking up the Reds, play some lineups with Mitch Keller as a salary relief guy. And I don't even hate playing some Reds against Mitch Keller and Mitch Keller in the same lineup just because he's so cheap if you want to go that route to be contrarian. Trevor Bower is my top pitching option on the slate at 10.8K, taking on these Pirates. They've been terrible, like Trevor Bower. Jesus Luzardo is a good option in the mid-tier, taking on the Seattle Mariners. This St. Louis Cardinals Brewers team is going to be, this game is going to be really interesting to see the Vegas lines because both pitchers, do have some talent, but both have struggled a little bit. So you could really go either way. But I do think you can target the guys that mash lefties on this Brewers team, and Avisail Garcia, Jed Jerko, Ryan Braun. And the bottom of the order is cheap, and I think that they're an interesting cheap stack. And Christian Yelich as an elite option. I mentioned Kim has struggled against lefties early on. Lefty, you can probably get him low owned, and he could definitely crush here. Then you have to have interest in these lefties from this Cardinals team: Colton Wong, Tommy Edman, Brad Miller, Matt Carpenter, and you could throw in the guys with power from the right-handed side of the plate to complete your stack, such as a Paul Goldschmidt, Paul DeJong, or Tyler O'Neill. Even Harrison Bader at the bottom of that lineup has some power and some speed, and he's only 3.3K, so wouldn't hate playing him. This Baltimore Atlanta Braves game, I think I'm more interested in the bats than anything. You could play Touki Toussaint, but he does have a big walk problem. So, while he is cheap, you're dealing with a walk issue, and best of luck to you with that. But these Braves I have interest in up and down just because they're stacked, but primarily the lefties. So, Freddie Freeman's a big-time option today. Nick Markakis, and then you could throw in pretty much anyone in this lineup because they're stacked. So it's Daily Fantasy Sports. We have salaries to play, we have positions to fill out, and the Braves are going to have a 5.86 implied run total. So you'll obviously want to have interest in them. And then the lefties on the Baltimore Orioles, mainly DJ Stewart at 2.4K. Love him. And you could throw in Chris Davis and Chance Sisco at the bottom of the order, and Cedric Mullins at the top. Jose Berrios is an interesting pitching option taking on the Chicago White Sox because while they do have a ton of power, they do have some strikeouts and they're mostly right-handed heavy, so that appeals to Jose Berrios' numbers and his splits. And then lastly, this last game of the slate, absolutely stacked lineups. I could see just stacking up these teams and not being contrarian because there's good pitching. I could see playing the pitching because they're taking on good teams and it being lower owned. Definitely an interesting spot. So you're going to have to decide which side of the fence you're on there. So that is my overall breakdown of the slate. Today's home run call of the day. It's going to be an interesting one because I had mentioned I really haven't been naming any elite names as of late with this home run call, and I kind of like that. I like being a little bit on the sneakier side, maybe playing some guys that not anyone has heard of. However, I have been on the worst streak since starting the segment. I've struck out on 3 calls in a row, which I don't think I got 2 wrong in a row prior to this little skid that I'm on here. So with that being said, I'm still going to be kind of sneaky. I mean, he's a name that many of you that play DFS might know, but I had mentioned that, Josh Lindblom and his splits, struggling against left-handed hitting. And there's this hitter in this lineup that does have a ton of power. It's only the strikeout rate that we need to worry about when he's taking on a guy with a high strikeout rate. And that is Brad Miller in the cleanup spot, taking on Lindblom today. I think Brad Miller is going deep. He's my home run call of the day. He does have a ton of power. He just has a strikeout issue. And I mentioned Lindblom's splits are just scary bad. And give you guys a quick little peek back at that. As always, I like to give you my reasoning. Show you why. He has a 662 slugging, not good. A 41.5% hard hit rate, not good. A 447 WOBA, not good. So yeah, I like these Cardinals lefties today. I like Brad Miller. He's my homer call of the day. And that is what I will sign off with. If you're enjoying the content and you're going to be tuning in for future videos, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. I know it's such a small thing, such as hitting a subscribe button, but it helps me out a ton. I greatly appreciate it. That is all from me today. I wish you all the best of luck tonight, and have a good one.